Deadly blizzard is sweeping through Chicago, and a young girl has vanished without a trace. But what if the storm is hiding something far more sinister? Join Detective James Thornton as he uncovers clues that suggest Lucy's disappearance is anything but an accident. Every step in this mystery brings him closer to a shocking truth. Will he find her before it's too late? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The winter of 1897 descended upon Chicago with a fury that old-timers claimed they had never witnessed in all their years. Snow fell in thick, relentless curtains, transforming the bustling city into a frozen labyrinth of white. The wind howled through the streets like a wounded beast, rattling windows and tearing at anything not firmly secured. It was the kind of blizzard that kept sensible folk huddled by their fireplaces, praying for spring. Detective James Thornton stood at the frost-covered window of the Chicago Police Department headquarters, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the wooden floor. At 32 years of age, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that made witnesses speak truthfully and criminals think twice. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jaw strong and defined, and his gray eyes held an intensity that missed nothing. He had built his reputation on solving cases that others deemed impossible, but the telegram crumpled in his hand presented a challenge unlike any he had faced before. A 7-year-old girl named Lucy Pemberton had vanished from her home on the north side of the city 3 days ago, just as the blizzard began its assault. The wealthy Pemberton family had contacted every authority they could reach, but the storm had made search efforts nearly impossible. Roads were impassable, visibility was measured in mere feet, and the temperature had plummeted to dangerous levels. Most of his colleagues had quietly written the case off as a tragedy, assuming the child had wandered into the storm and succumbed to the elements. James refused to accept that conclusion. Something about the circumstances troubled him deeply. Children did not simply vanish from locked houses in the middle of the night, storm or no storm. He had read the initial reports a dozen times, studying every detail, searching for the thread that would unravel the mystery. The door to his office creaked open, and Captain Morrison entered, his weathered face creased with concern. He was a broad man with silver hair and a mustache that had seen better days. He had been with the department for nearly 30 years and had learned to trust James's instincts, even when they led down unconventional paths. "Thornton, you cannot be seriously considering going out in this weather," Morrison said, his voice gruff with worry. "The Pemberton case is a tragedy, but throwing your own life away will not bring that child back. The blizzard is only getting worse. The Weather Service says it will continue for at least 2 more days. James turned from the window, his expression resolute. "That is precisely why I must go now, sir. If there is even the slightest chance that Lucy Pemberton is alive somewhere, every hour counts. The cold is unforgiving. I have studied the case file, and there are inconsistencies that suggest this may not be a simple case of a child wandering off." Morrison sighed heavily, recognizing the determination in his detective's eyes. He had seen that look before, and he knew that no argument would dissuade James once his mind was set. "What inconsistencies?" "The family stated that they checked on her at 9 o'clock in the evening, and when her mother went to wake her the following morning, the child was gone. The window was found slightly open. It seems clear enough, tragic as it is." James walked to his desk and retrieved a leather folder containing his notes. "The window in question is on the 2nd floor of the Pemberton mansion, Captain. It is at least 15 feet from the ground, with no trellis or accessible route for a child to climb down safely. Furthermore, the snow beneath that window was undisturbed when the family discovered her absence. If Lucy had climbed out and jumped, there would have been marks in the snow, some indication of her landing." Morrison frowned, his interest piqued despite his reservations. "Perhaps the snow covered the marks? The storm has been quite severe. The family discovered her missing at 7 in the morning. The snow had not yet accumulated to a depth that would completely erase such marks in that short time frame. I believe someone removed Lucy from that house, Captain. Someone who knew the layout, who had access, and who wanted it to appear as though the child had fled into the storm of her own accord." The captain's expression darkened. "You are suggesting an abduction. But who would do such a thing?" "The Pembertons are a respected family. Robert Pemberton owns half the textile mills in the city. They have no known enemies." James's jaw tightened. "Wealth often breeds enemies, sir, whether known or hidden. I intend to travel to the Pemberton estate today and conduct a thorough investigation. I will interview the family and the household staff. Someone knows something, even if they do not realize its significance. Morrison placed a heavy hand on James's shoulder. Very well, detective. But promise me you will be careful. This blizzard is deadly, and I cannot afford to lose my best investigator to the elements. Take proper equipment, and if conditions become too dangerous, you turn back immediately. That is an order. James nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for his captain's trust. You have my word, sir. I will exercise all caution. 2 hours later, James found himself bundled in his heaviest wool coat, a thick scarf wrapped around his face, and sturdy boots that reached nearly to his knees. He had arranged for a horse-drawn sleigh, as automobiles would be useless in the deep snow. The driver, an experienced man named Thomas, who had navigated Chicago winters for decades, looked skeptical but willing. You certain about this, detective? Thomas asked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I have been driving through these streets for 25 years, and I have never seen a storm like this one. The visibility is almost nothing, and the cold will freeze exposed skin in minutes. I am certain, James replied, climbing into the sleigh and pulling a heavy blanket over his legs. The Pemberton estate on Lakeshore Drive. Do you know it? Thomas nodded grimly. I know it. Fine house, sits right on the lake. It will take us at least 90 minutes in these conditions, perhaps longer. We will need to stop periodically to rest the horse and ensure we have not lost our way. As the sleigh lurched forward, James felt the full force of the blizzard assault them. The wind screamed in his ears and snow pelted his face like tiny needles despite the scarf. The city he knew so well became an alien landscape, familiar buildings transformed into ghostly shapes barely visible through the white curtain. Thomas guided the horse with expert precision, relying on years of experience to navigate streets that were barely distinguishable from sidewalks. James's mind turned over the details of the case as they traveled. Lucy Pemberton was the only child of Robert and Catherine Pemberton. By all accounts, she was a bright, cheerful child who loved reading and playing piano. The household staff consisted of a butler named Henry Ashford, a cook named Mrs. Davies, 2 housemaids, and a governess named Miss Victoria Whitmore, who had been with the family for 2 years. The governess intrigued James most. Miss Whitmore had been the last person to see Lucy before bedtime, reading her a story and tucking her in at 9 o'clock. According to the initial report, she had seemed distraught when the child went missing, even fainting at one point from the shock. James had learned long ago that strong emotional reactions could be genuine or could serve to deflect suspicion. He would need to speak with Miss Whitmore at length. The sleigh jolted violently, nearly throwing James from his seat. Thomas pulled hard on the reins, bringing the horse to a stop. Apologies, detective. We hit something buried in the snow. Let me check for damage. Thomas climbed down, disappearing into the swirling white. James waited, pulling his coat tighter against the penetrating cold. Minutes passed, and he began to worry that something had happened to the driver. Just as he was about to call out, Thomas reappeared, his face pale beneath his frost-covered beard. Detective, you need to see this, he said, his voice shaken. There is a carriage overturned just ahead. It looks like it has been there for at least a day, maybe 2. James immediately descended from the sleigh, his detective instincts overriding his discomfort. The overturned carriage was indeed half buried in snow, its dark wood barely visible. He approached carefully, peering inside the passenger compartment. It was empty, with no signs of blood or struggle. The horses that had pulled it were nowhere to be seen, likely having broken free and fled. Do you recognize this carriage? James asked Thomas. The driver examined it closely, brushing snow away from a crest painted on the door. His eyes widened. This is the Pemberton family carriage, detective. I would recognize that crest anywhere. James's pulse quickened. This changed everything. When did the family report Lucy missing? What was the exact timeline? According to the report, they discovered her absence on the morning of December 10th. That was 3 days ago. The storm began the evening of December 9th. James examined the carriage more carefully, his mind racing. This carriage was traveling somewhere when the storm hit. It overturned, possibly due to the conditions or perhaps the horses panicked. But where was it going, and who was inside? He searched the interior thoroughly, finding a small leather satchel wedged beneath one of the seats. Inside were children's clothes, a few books, and a doll. His heart sank as he realized what he was looking at. Someone had been transporting Lucy away from the city when disaster struck. Thomas, we must reach the Pemberton estate immediately. This is not a case of a child wandering into the storm. Lucy was being taken somewhere deliberately, and whoever was responsible may have fled on foot when the carriage overturned. They continued their journey with renewed urgency, the revelation adding weight to every passing moment. The blizzard seemed to intensify, as if nature itself sought to prevent them from uncovering the truth. When they finally reached the Pemberton estate, James could barely make out the imposing structure through the snow. It was a magnificent mansion built in the Victorian style, with multiple chimneys and large windows that now appeared dark and unwelcoming. James approached the front entrance and used the heavy brass knocker. After a moment, the door opened to reveal an elderly man in formal butler's attire. His face was drawn with worry and exhaustion. "I am Detective James Thornton from the Chicago Police Department," James announced, showing his credentials. "I am here to investigate the disappearance of Lucy Pemberton. You must be Henry Ashford." The butler nodded, his relief evident. "Yes, sir. Please come in from the cold." "The family has been praying someone would come, though we feared the storm would prevent any assistance. Mr. and Mrs. Pemberton are in the drawing room. I shall announce you immediately." As James entered the warmth of the house, stamping snow from his boots, he took note of his surroundings. The entrance hall was elegant, with polished marble floors and paintings adorning the walls. A grand staircase swept upward to the second floor, its banister carved from dark wood. Everything spoke of wealth and refinement, yet there was an atmosphere of profound sadness that permeated the space. Henry Ashford led James through a corridor lined with family portraits, their subjects seeming to watch with somber expressions as they passed. The butler knocked softly on a set of double doors before opening them to reveal a spacious drawing room decorated in rich burgundy and gold. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the room's occupants. Robert Pemberton stood as James entered, a man in his early 40s with graying temples and eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. His wife Catherine remained seated on a velvet settee, her delicate hands clutching a handkerchief. She was a beautiful woman despite her obvious distress, with honey-colored hair arranged in an elegant style and features that spoke of refined breeding. Beside her sat a younger woman whom James immediately recognized must be the governess, Miss Victoria Whitmore. James found himself momentarily arrested by the sight of Miss Whitmore. She was perhaps 26 years of age, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple but becoming style. Her eyes were a striking shade of green, currently glistening with unshed tears, and her face held a natural beauty that required no artificial enhancement. She wore a modest dark blue dress appropriate for a governess, yet it could not diminish her graceful presence. When their eyes met, James felt an unexpected jolt of connection that caught him entirely off guard. "Detective Thornton, thank God you have come," Robert Pemberton said, crossing the room to shake James's hand firmly. "We had begun to lose hope that anyone would brave this terrible storm. Please, tell us you have news of our Lucy." James removed his hat, holding it respectfully as he addressed the family. "Mr. Pemberton, Mrs. Pemberton, I must be honest with you. I do not yet have news of Lucy's whereabouts, but I have discovered evidence that changes the nature of this investigation significantly. On my journey here, I found your family carriage overturned approximately 3 miles from this estate. Inside was a satchel containing children's belongings." Catherine Pemberton gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Victoria Whitmore stood abruptly, her face draining of color. "The carriage? But that is impossible. The carriage has been in the stable since the storm began. Are you certain it was ours?" "Quite certain, Miss Whitmore. Your driver confirmed the family crest." "Mrs. Pemberton, I must ask you some difficult questions. When did you last see Lucy, and can you account for all members of your household on the evening of December 9th? Catherine's voice trembled as she spoke. "I saw my darling girl at dinner that evening. She was in good spirits, chattering about a story Miss Whitmore had been reading to her. After dinner, Victoria took her upstairs for her bath and bedtime routine. That was the last time I saw my baby alive." "Please, Mrs. Pemberton, do not assume the worst," James said gently. "I have reason to believe Lucy may still be alive. The evidence suggests she was being transported somewhere when the storm struck. If whoever took her sought shelter, there is hope." He turned to Victoria. "Miss Whitmore, I need you to recount everything that happened that evening in precise detail. Every word Lucy spoke, every action, no matter how insignificant it may seem. Victoria sat down slowly, composing herself with visible effort. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady, with a slight accent that James could not quite place. I collected Lucy from the dining room at 7:30, as was our custom. She was wearing her favorite pink dress and was excited because the snow had begun to fall. She loved watching the snowflakes through her window. We went upstairs to her room and I helped her prepare for bed. She bathed, and then I braided her hair as I always did. James listened intently, noting every detail. Did she seem afraid of anything? Did she mention any strangers or unusual occurrences in the preceding days? Victoria's brow furrowed in concentration. No, nothing of that nature. She was her normal, cheerful self. I read to her from a book of fairy tales, her favorite collection. She asked me to read the story about the Snow Princess 3 times. She said the princess reminded her of someone, but when I asked who, she simply smiled and would not tell me. A tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. I tucked her in at 9 o'clock precisely. I checked that her window was locked, as I always did, and I left her room. She was safe, Detective. I made certain of it. Robert Pemberton paced to the window, staring out at the raging blizzard. Someone took our daughter from this house, Detective. Someone violated our home and stole the most precious thing in our lives. But who could have done such a thing? We have no enemies. Our staff has been with us for years. It makes no sense. James approached the window, standing beside the distraught father. Mr. Pemberton, in my experience, crimes of this nature are rarely random. Someone had motive, means, and opportunity. I need to interview every member of your household staff individually. I also need to examine Lucy's room and any other areas of the house that might provide clues. Time is of the essence. Of course, Detective. Anything you require. Henry will show you to Lucy's room, and he can arrange for you to speak with each staff member privately. Robert turned to face James, his expression desperate. Please, I am a wealthy man. If this is about ransom, I will pay any amount. Just bring my daughter home safely. No ransom demand has been made? James asked, finding this detail significant. None whatsoever. We have heard nothing since she vanished. This troubled James deeply. Kidnappers seeking money typically made contact quickly. The absence of a ransom demand suggested a different motive entirely, which made the situation far more complex and potentially more dangerous. Henry Ashford led James upstairs to Lucy's bedroom, with Victoria following at a respectful distance. James was acutely aware of her presence, finding himself distracted by the subtle scent of lavender that seemed to surround her. He forced himself to focus on the investigation, pushing aside the unexpected attraction he felt. Lucy's room was decorated in soft pastels, with a canopy bed, shelves filled with books and dolls, and a small writing desk by the window. Everything was neat and orderly, frozen in time from the moment she disappeared. James examined the window carefully. It was indeed locked from the inside, just as Victoria had stated. This window has not been opened recently, James observed, running his finger along the frame. There is no draft, no moisture, and the lock shows no signs of tampering. Miss Whitmore, you are certain this was secured when you left Lucy that evening? Victoria stepped closer and James caught himself noticing how the firelight from the hallway caught in her auburn hair. Absolutely certain, Detective. I checked it myself, as I did every night. Lucy had a fear of the dark sometimes, and I did not want her worrying about the window coming open in the wind. James knelt down, examining the floorboards. If she did not leave through the window, then she left through the door. But according to your statement, the household was secured for the evening. Who would have had access to this floor after 9 o'clock? Only the family and Miss Whitmore sleep on this floor. Henry Ashford interjected from the doorway. The maids' quarters are on the 3rd floor, and I have my room near the kitchen. Mrs. Davies, our cook, lives in a cottage on the grounds. James stood, his mind working through possibilities. I need to see the rest of this floor, particularly any servants' stairs or alternative routes someone might have used. He paused, looking directly at Victoria. Miss Whitmore, I must ask you a difficult question. Is there anyone in this household or connected to this family who might wish to harm Lucy or the Pembertons? Victoria's eyes widened, and for a moment James saw something flicker across her face. Fear, recognition. It was gone before he could identify it clearly. I cannot imagine anyone wishing harm to that sweet child, Detective. She was beloved by everyone who knew her, and yet someone took her, James said quietly. Someone who knew this house well enough to move through it unseen and to transport her away without raising an alarm. As they moved through the second floor, examining the layout and various access points, James found himself increasingly drawn to Victoria Whitmore. She was intelligent, observant, and clearly devoted to Lucy. When she spoke of the child, genuine love and anguish colored her words. Yet there was something else, a guardedness that suggested she was holding something back. They descended the servants' staircase, which led down to the kitchen area. The stairs were narrow and dark, and James could easily imagine someone carrying a sleeping child down them without being detected. At the bottom they encountered Mrs. Davies, a plump woman with flour-dusted hands and a kind face marked by worry. "Detective, is it true you found the carriage?" she asked anxiously. "Henry just told me. Lord have mercy. What does it mean?" "It means that Lucy was removed from this house and placed in that carriage, Mrs. Davies. I need to ask you about that evening. Did you hear or see anything unusual? Any sounds? Any visitors? Anything at all out of the ordinary?" Mrs. Davies wrung her hands, thinking hard. "I went to bed early that night, around 8 o'clock. The storm was beginning and I was tired from preparing dinner. I heard nothing unusual, Detective. I wish to God I had." James interviewed the two housemaids next, both young women who seemed terrified by the situation. Neither had anything useful to contribute, having been in their quarters on the third floor throughout the evening. Henry Ashford was equally unhelpful, though James believed the butler's distress was genuine. As evening approached and the storm showed no signs of abating, Robert Pemberton insisted that James remain at the estate for the night. "You cannot possibly travel back to the city in these conditions, Detective. We have ample room, and you can continue your investigation fresh in the morning." James accepted, knowing it was the prudent choice. Henry showed him to a comfortable guest room, and arrangements were made for Thomas and the horse to be accommodated in the stable. As James stood at the window of his room, watching the endless snow fall, he heard a soft knock at his door. He opened it to find Victoria Whitmore standing in the corridor, her expression troubled. "Detective Thornton, I must speak with you privately. There is something I did not mention in front of the family, something that may be important to your investigation." James stepped aside, allowing her to enter. He left the door appropriately open, mindful of propriety. "Please, Miss Whitmore, tell me everything. Any detail could be crucial." Victoria clasped her hands together, clearly struggling with her decision to confide in him. "3 weeks ago I received a letter. It was delivered to me here at the house, but it bore no return address and no signature. The letter contained only a few lines, written in a hand I did not recognize." "What did it say?" James asked, his pulse quickening. "It said that Lucy was in danger, that I should be vigilant, and that I should trust no one in this household. At first I dismissed it as a cruel joke or perhaps a mistake. But then, 2 days before Lucy disappeared, I found her playing in the garden with a locket I had never seen before. When I asked where she got it, she said a nice lady gave it to her and told her to keep it secret." James felt as though pieces of a puzzle were beginning to align, though the full picture remained frustratingly unclear. "Do you still have this letter? And the locket?" Victoria reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper and a small silver locket. She handed both to James, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through him, and he saw color rise in her cheeks. The letter was brief, exactly as she had described, written in an elegant but unfamiliar script. The locket was delicate, designed for a child, with intricate engraving on its surface. James opened it carefully and found himself staring at a small photograph inside. It showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding an infant in her arms. "Do you recognize this woman?" he asked Victoria. She shook her head. "I have never seen her before." "Lucy would not tell me who she was, only that the lady was very nice and very sad." James studied the photograph intently. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, well-dressed, with an air of refinement. Something about her features seemed familiar, though he could not immediately place why. "Miss Whitmore, why did you not mention this to the police when Lucy disappeared?" Victoria's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because I was afraid, Detective. The letter warned me to trust no one in this household. What if someone here is involved? What if speaking of it put Lucy in even greater danger? I have been tormented by indecision, not knowing what to do." James moved closer, his voice gentle but firm. You did the right thing by telling me now. This evidence is crucial, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else you are withholding? Anything at all? Victoria met his gaze, and in that moment, James felt the full force of the connection between them. Her eyes held intelligence, courage, and something deeper that made his breath catch. There is one more thing, she said softly. On the night Lucy disappeared, I woke around midnight. I thought I heard music, very faint, coming from somewhere below. It sounded like a music box playing a lullaby. By the time I rose to investigate, it had stopped. I convinced myself I had dreamed it, but now I wonder. A music box? James considered this. Does Lucy own one? No, she does not. That is why it seemed so strange. James carefully folded the letter and pocketed both it and the locket. Miss Whitmore, Victoria, I want you to stay close to me for the remainder of this investigation. If someone in this house is indeed involved, you may be in danger as well. The person who wrote that letter was trying to warn you, which suggests they know something about what was planned. Victoria nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I keep thinking about Lucy out there in the storm, frightened and alone. She is such a small, delicate child. The cold, the fear, it must be unbearable for her. Without thinking, James placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. We will find her, Victoria. I give you my word. Someone went to great lengths to take Lucy, which means she is valuable to them for some reason. That suggests they intend to keep her safe, at least for now. Victoria looked up at him, hope and trust shining in her green eyes. You truly believe that? I do. And I believe the answer to where she is lies somewhere in this house, in the connections between these people, and in that mysterious woman who gave Lucy the locket. Tomorrow, I will begin unraveling those connections. But for now, you should rest. This has been an ordeal for you. As Victoria left his room, James found himself watching her retreat down the corridor, struck by how much he wanted to protect her, to ease her suffering. He had known her for mere hours, yet something about her had reached past his professional detachment and touched something deeper. He shook his head, reminding himself that he could not afford such distractions. A child's life hung in the balance, and he needed all his focus and skill to solve this mystery before it was too late. James rose before dawn, the howling wind outside his window serving as an insistent alarm. The blizzard continued its relentless assault, and he found himself wondering how anyone could have survived 3 days in such conditions. Yet he clung to the hope that Lucy had found shelter, that whoever had taken her possessed enough humanity to protect her from the deadly cold. After dressing quickly, he made his way downstairs to find Henry Ashford already awake, stoking the fires throughout the house. The butler looked as though he had not slept, his face drawn and pale in the flickering lamplight. "Good morning, Detective," Henry said quietly. "I have prepared coffee in the kitchen if you would care for some. The storm has not diminished at all during the night. I fear we are well and truly trapped here until it passes." James accepted the offer gratefully, following the butler to the warm kitchen where Mrs. Davies was already preparing breakfast. The cook looked up as they entered, her eyes red from crying. "Any news, Detective?" she asked hopefully. "Not yet, Mrs. Davies, but I am making progress. Tell me, have you been with the Pemberton family long?" "Near about 15 years now, sir. I came when Mrs. Catherine was newly married to Mr. Robert. I have watched little Lucy grow from a babe in arms. She is like my own grandchild, that sweet girl." James sipped the strong, hot coffee, feeling it warm him from within. "In all that time, have you noticed any unusual visitors to the house? Anyone who showed particular interest in Lucy?" Mrs. Davies thought for a moment, her brow furrowing. "Well, there was Mrs. Pemberton's sister, Miss Sarah Blackwood, but she passed away near 2 years ago now. Tragic thing it was. Died in childbirth along with her babe. Mrs. Catherine took it very hard. They were close as sisters could be." James felt a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Miss Blackwood died in childbirth? Was she married? "No, sir, and that was the scandal of it all. She never would say who the father was, took that secret to her grave. The family tried to hush it up, sent her away to have the baby in private, but word got out, as it always does. Broke her parents' hearts, it did. Where did she go to have the child? Or some private hospital downstate, I believe. She was gone for near 6 months. When the telegram came saying she had died, Mrs. Catherine went into a terrible state, took to her bed for weeks with grief." James exchanged a meaningful glance with Henry. Do you know the name of this hospital? The butler shook his head. Mr. Pemberton handled all those arrangements personally. He was very protective of the family's privacy during that difficult time. Before James could ask more questions, Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway. She wore a simple gray dress, her hair arranged neatly, though he could see the exhaustion in her face. Their eyes met, and James felt that same inexplicable pull toward her. "Good morning, Detective," she said softly. "I hope you slept well, though I confess I found little rest myself. I kept thinking about our conversation last night, about the locket and the mysterious woman." James set down his coffee cup. "Miss Whitmore, I need to ask you something. In the time you have been governess here, did Mrs. Pemberton ever speak of her sister, Sarah Blackwood?" Victoria's expression shifted to one of surprise. "Why, yes, occasionally. She spoke of her with great sadness. I know that Miss Blackwood died in tragic circumstances, though Mrs. Pemberton never provided details. She kept a portrait of her sister in her private sitting room. I have seen it many times when attending to correspondence for her." "I need to see that portrait immediately," James said, a theory forming in his mind that seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. Victoria led him upstairs to a small, elegant sitting room adjacent to the master bedroom. On the wall hung a portrait of a young woman who bore a strong resemblance to Catherine Pemberton, though her features were softer, her eyes holding a dreamy quality. James studied the face carefully, then pulled the locket from his pocket and opened it. The resemblance between the woman in the photograph and Sarah Blackwood was unmistakable. They were the same person. James felt his pulse quicken as the implications crashed over him like a wave. "Detective, what is it?" Victoria asked, seeing the intensity in his expression. "You have realized something, haven't you?" James turned to her, his mind racing through possibilities and connections. "Victoria, what if Sarah Blackwood did not die in childbirth? What if that was a lie? A story created to hide something else entirely? What if she survived? And what if her child survived as well?" Victoria's hand flew to her throat. "But why would the family lie about such a thing? That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense if there was shame involved, if they wanted to erase what they saw as a stain on the family name. But Victoria, think about this. If Sarah survived and had a child, that child would be approximately 2 years old now. What if Sarah has been watching Lucy from afar? What if the locket was her way of reaching out? But what does this have to do with Lucy's disappearance?" Victoria asked, though James could see understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. "Everything," James said firmly. "I believe Sarah Blackwood took Lucy, not to harm her, but perhaps to reclaim something that was taken from her. Think about it. The warning letter to you suggested someone in this household could not be trusted. What if Sarah was trying to warn you that something was going to happen? What if she felt she had no choice but to act?" Victoria sank into a chair, her face pale. But where would she take Lucy? And why cause such pain to her own sister? James paced the small room, his detective's mind assembling the puzzle pieces. The overturned carriage was traveling south, away from the city. If Sarah was indeed taking Lucy somewhere, it would need to be a place she felt safe. A place connected to her past, perhaps. Mrs. Davies mentioned that Sarah went to a hospital downstate to have her baby. What if she never left that area? What if she has been living there all this time? "We must tell Mr. and Mrs. Pemberton immediately," Victoria said, rising from her chair. James caught her arm gently. "Not yet. We need more proof before we make such accusations. If I am wrong, we will cause unnecessary anguish. But if I am right, we need to find out exactly where Sarah is and why she took Lucy. I need to search this house thoroughly, particularly any private papers or correspondence that might give us a location." For the next several hours, James and Victoria worked together, carefully examining Catherine Pemberton's private papers with Henry's reluctant permission. The butler was torn between his loyalty to the family and his desire to find Lucy, but ultimately his love for the child won out. They found letters, documents, and finally, tucked away in a locked drawer, a series of correspondence between Robert Pemberton and a Dr. Edmund Price at the Riverside Sanctuary, a private hospital in Springfield. The letters made grim reading. They detailed Sarah's madness following the birth of her child, her refusal to give up the baby for adoption as the family had planned, and her eventual commitment to the asylum section of the hospital when she threatened to expose the family's attempt to take her child. The final letter, dated 18 months ago, informed Robert that Sarah had become docile and accepting of her situation, and that her child had been placed with a suitable family. James felt anger burning in his chest as he read the cold clinical language describing the systematic destruction of Sarah Blackwood's life. "They took her child from her," he said, his voice tight with fury. "They committed her to an asylum to silence her, and they told everyone she was dead. This is monstrous." Victoria's eyes glistened with tears as she read over his shoulder. "But the letter says her child was adopted. If that is true, why would Sarah take Lucy? What is the connection?" James pulled out the final letter in the bundle, one that had been folded and refolded many times, as though someone had read it repeatedly. It was written in a feminine hand, shaky and desperate. "My dearest Catherine," it began, "I know you believe I have lost my mind, but I am as sane as I ever was. They took my baby, my sweet Rose, and gave her to strangers. I begged them not to, I pleaded, but no one would listen. You were my sister, my closest friend. Why did you abandon me? Why did you let them do this? I have learned that Rose died 6 months ago. Pneumonia, they said. My baby is gone, and I was never even told. I have nothing left now, nothing but the memory of holding her in my arms. But I swear to you, Catherine, I will not die in this place. I will find a way out, and I will make you understand what you have done. I will make you feel the pain of losing a child, just as I have felt it. Then perhaps you will know the anguish that consumes me every waking moment." The letter was dated 4 months ago. There was no indication that Catherine had ever received it or responded to it. James looked at Victoria, seeing his own horror reflected in her face. Sarah's child died, and she blames Catherine for not protecting her, for abandoning her sister when she needed help most. This was not a kidnapping, Victoria. This was revenge. "Dear God," Victoria whispered. "She took Lucy to make Catherine suffer as she has suffered. But detective, the carriage overturned days ago in the middle of a blizzard. If Sarah and Lucy were inside, where are they now?" James stood abruptly, his mind working frantically. "The carriage was 3 miles from here, traveling south. If they survived the crash, they would need to find shelter immediately. In a blizzard like this, they could not have traveled far on foot. There must be something between here and where the carriage was found. Some building or structure where they could have taken refuge." Henry Ashford, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke up suddenly. "The old Patterson estate. It sits abandoned about a mile south of where you found the carriage. The family moved to Boston 5 years ago and has been trying to sell the property ever since. It is empty, but the structure is sound. If someone needed shelter in a storm, it would serve." James felt certainty settle over him like a mantle. "That is where they are. It has to be. Victoria, I need you to stay here and keep the family calm. Henry, I need you to help me prepare. I am going out into that storm to bring Lucy home." Victoria grasped his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "James, you cannot go alone. The storm is still raging. You could die out there." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the intimacy of it was not lost on him. He covered her hand with his own, drawing strength from her touch. "I have no choice, Victoria. Every moment that child spends in Sarah's care is another moment of danger. Sarah is clearly not in her right mind, and grief can drive people to terrible acts. I must go now, while there is still hope." Thomas, the sleigh driver, proved invaluable once again. Despite the danger, he agreed to take James to the Patterson estate, using his knowledge of the area to navigate through the blinding snow. The journey was harrowing, the wind threatening to overturn their sleigh multiple times, but Thomas's skill and determination saw them through. When they finally reached the Patterson estate, it loomed before them like a ghost through the white curtain of snow. It was a grand old house, clearly once magnificent but now showing signs of neglect. Several windows were broken, and snow had drifted against the walls, but smoke rising from one of the chimneys confirmed that someone was indeed inside. James approached the front door cautiously, his heart pounding. He knocked firmly, calling out, "Miss Blackwood! Sarah! My name is Detective James Thornton. I am here to help you and Lucy. Please open the door. You are not in trouble. I only want to ensure the child is safe." For a long moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, the door creaked open to reveal a woman who bore the ravages of suffering on her once beautiful face. Sarah Blackwood looked far older than her years, her eyes hollow and haunted, her hair streaked with premature gray. In her arms, wrapped in blankets, was Lucy Pemberton, alive but clearly frightened. "You cannot take her from me," Sarah said, her voice cracking with desperation. "She is all I have left. My Rose is gone, stolen from me and left to die alone. Lucy is Catherine's rose. Now Catherine will know what it means to lose everything. James kept his voice calm and gentle, as one might speak to a wounded animal. Sarah, I know what was done to you. I know about your daughter, about how you were betrayed by your own family. What happened to you was unconscionable, and you have every right to your anger and your grief. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. They took my baby. They said I was unfit, that I was mad, but I was not mad. I loved her. I would have given my life for her. I believe you, James said sincerely. You are not mad, Sarah. You are a mother who has suffered an unbearable loss. But Lucy is innocent in all of this. She has done nothing to deserve being caught in the middle of this pain. She is cold and frightened, and she needs her family. Her family. Sarah laughed bitterly. The same family that destroyed me, that condemned my child to death? No, James said firmly. Her family is her mother and father who love her desperately, who have been out of their minds with worry. And her family is also you, Sarah. You are her aunt. You have a place in her life if you want it, but not like this, not through fear and revenge. Sarah looked down at Lucy, who was shivering despite the blankets. The child's lips were tinged with blue, and James realized with alarm that she was suffering from exposure to the cold. Please, Sarah, James continued, taking a careful step forward. Let me take Lucy somewhere warm and safe, and then let me help you. You deserve justice for what was done to you. You deserve to have your story heard. But this path you are on will only lead to more suffering, for you and for this innocent child. Sarah's resolve seemed to crumble, tears streaming down her face. I did not mean to hurt her. When the carriage overturned, I thought we would both die. I have kept her as warm as I could, but I have no food, no proper supplies. I did not think beyond making Catherine feel the pain I felt. James closed the distance between them, his voice filled with compassion. I know, Sarah, I know, but it is time to end this now. Give me Lucy, and I promise you, I will make sure your story is told. I will make sure people know what was done to you. You will not be silenced again. Slowly, reluctantly, Sarah held out the trembling child. James took Lucy gently, wrapping her in his own coat and holding her close to share his warmth. The child whimpered but did not cry, too weak from her ordeal. James cradled Lucy against his chest, feeling her small body shiver uncontrollably. Her breathing was shallow, and he knew they needed to get her to warmth and medical care immediately. Sarah stood before him, broken and defeated, her face a portrait of anguish and resignation. Despite everything she had done, James felt profound pity for this woman who had been so thoroughly betrayed by those who should have protected her. Sarah, come with us, James said gently. You cannot stay here. The storm is still dangerous and you need care as well. I give you my word that I will advocate for you, that I will ensure the truth comes to light. Sarah shook her head slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. What life do I have left, detective? My child is dead. My family despises me. I have committed a crime that will see me imprisoned or worse. Perhaps it would be better if I simply stayed here and let the cold take me. At least then I would be with my Rose again. No, James said firmly. Sarah, your daughter's death was not your fault, and your life still has value. What your family did to you was wrong, but adding your death to this tragedy will solve nothing. Please come with us. Let me help you find a way forward. For a moment, Sarah seemed to waver, her eyes searching James's face for any sign of deception. Then, slowly, she nodded. Very well, detective. I will come. But I do not expect mercy, nor do I deserve it. Thomas had kept the sleigh ready, and they wrapped both Sarah and Lucy in every available blanket before beginning the treacherous journey back to the Pemberton estate. The wind had finally begun to subside slightly, though snow still fell in heavy sheets. Lucy drifted in and out of consciousness in James's arms, and he found himself murmuring reassurances to her, promises that she would be safe, that she would see her mother soon. When they finally arrived at the mansion, the door flew open before they even reached it. Victoria stood in the entrance, her face alight with hope and fear. Behind her, Robert and Catherine Pemberton rushed forward, Catherine's anguished cry piercing the air as she saw her daughter. Lucy, oh my baby, my precious baby. Catherine reached for her child, and James carefully transferred the small, cold form into her mother's waiting arms. Catherine sank to her knees on the marble floor, sobbing as she held Lucy close, rocking her and whispering words of love and relief. Robert Pemberton's eyes were streaming with tears as he knelt beside his wife, embracing them both. Thank God you found her, Detective. We can never repay you for this. But then Robert's gaze fell upon Sarah, standing in the doorway supported by Thomas. The color drained from his face, and his expression shifted from joy to shock, to something approaching horror. Sarah, but you are supposed to be... How can this be? Catherine looked up, still clutching Lucy, and her eyes widened as she saw her sister. Sarah, no, this is impossible. Robert told me you died. He said you died with your baby 2 years ago. The raw pain in Sarah's voice cut through the confusion. I did not die, Catherine, though perhaps it would have been kinder if I had. They took my Rose from me. They locked me away in an asylum and told the world I was dead. And you, my own sister, you believed them. You never once tried to find me, to help me. Catherine's face crumpled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Robert, what is she saying? What have you done? Robert Pemberton stood slowly, his expression defensive. I did what I thought best for the family, Catherine. Sarah was hysterical, threatening to create a scandal. Her child was illegitimate, born from God knows what shameful liaison. I arranged for the baby to be adopted by a respectable family, and I had Sarah committed for her own good. She was not well, Catherine. She was making wild threats, saying things that could have destroyed our reputation. For her own good? Sarah's voice rose to a near scream. You stole my child and imprisoned me, and you dare claim it was for my good? My Rose died 6 months later, died without her mother, died alone and afraid, and no one even told me until I bribed a nurse to bring me news. You murdered her as surely as if you had put a knife in her heart. Victoria moved quickly to Sarah's side, supporting the distraught woman as she swayed. James watched as the pieces of this family's tragedy continued to unfold, feeling the weight of their interconnected pain. Mrs. Davies had appeared with blankets and hot tea, immediately attending to Lucy, whose color was slowly beginning to return in the warmth of the house. Catherine stood, still holding Lucy, her eyes fixed on her husband, with an expression of betrayed fury that James had never seen before. You told me she was dead, Robert. You held me while I wept for my sister, and all the while she was alive, suffering in an asylum. How could you do this? How could you lie to me about something so fundamental? I was protecting you, Robert insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Protecting our family from shame and scandal. Your father agreed with my decision. He signed the commitment papers himself. My father is dead and cannot answer for his sins, Catherine said, her voice cold as ice. But you are here, and you will answer for yours. You took my sister from me, Robert. You made me believe I had lost her forever, and in doing so, you created this nightmare. Sarah took Lucy because you took her child. This entire horror is your doing. James stepped forward, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. Mr. Pemberton, what you did to Miss Blackwood constitutes unlawful imprisonment and possibly fraud. However, my immediate concern is the welfare of these 2 victims. Lucy needs medical attention, and so does Sarah. The storm is beginning to break, and I will send for a doctor immediately. He turned to Sarah, his expression compassionate. Miss Blackwood, you have committed a serious crime by taking Lucy. However, given the circumstances and the provocation, I believe there are mitigating factors that any reasonable court would consider. I will include in my report the full context of what was done to you and how it led to your actions. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I never wanted to hurt Lucy, Detective. I only wanted Catherine to understand, to feel even a fraction of the pain I have endured. But when the carriage overturned and I held that frightened child in my arms, all I could think of was my Rose. How terrified she must have been when she fell ill. How she must have cried for me. I kept Lucy warm as best I could. I tried to comfort her, but I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I simply did not know how to undo it. Catherine handed Lucy to Mrs. Davies with whispered instructions to take her upstairs and tend to her. Then, to everyone's shock, she walked directly to Sarah and embraced her sister. Both women collapsed into each other's arms, weeping with a grief that had been denied for far too long. I am so sorry, Catherine whispered brokenly. I am so sorry I was not there for you. I should have questioned Robert's story, should have demanded to see you, to attend your funeral. I was weak and foolish, and my failure cost you everything. Can you ever forgive me? Sarah clung to her sister, her voice muffled against Catherine's shoulder. I blamed you for so long. I thought you had abandoned me willingly. But I see now that you were deceived, just as I was. We were both victims of men who thought they knew better, who believed they had the right to control our lives and our choices." James caught Victoria's eye across the room, and the understanding that passed between them required no words. This was not a simple case of good and evil, victim and perpetrator. It was a tragedy born of pride, patriarchal control, and the systematic silencing of women's voices and choices. Sarah had done wrong in taking Lucy, but the wrongs done to her were far greater and had been perpetrated by those with power and authority. Over the following hours, as the storm finally began to subside and the doctor arrived to tend to Lucy and Sarah, James worked with Victoria to document everything they had learned. He wrote a detailed report that laid bare the full scope of Robert Pemberton's actions, including the illegal commitment and the lies that had torn the family apart. He also noted Sarah's genuine remorse and the fact that she had kept Lucy as safe as possible under dire circumstances. Lucy, thankfully, would make a full recovery. The doctor pronounced that while she had suffered from exposure and fear, there was no lasting physical harm. She was sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, occasionally whimpering but responding well to warmth and care. Sarah, too, was found to be in relatively good health, though emotionally devastated by the culmination of her grief and rage. As evening approached and the snow finally stopped falling, James found himself alone with Victoria in the library. The house had settled into an exhausted quiet, the various dramas temporarily suspended as people rested and processed the day's revelations. Victoria stood by the window, watching the last light fade from the winter sky, her profile elegant and thoughtful. "You were magnificent today," James said softly, approaching her. "Your courage in confiding in me about the letter and the locket was crucial to solving this case. Without your trust, Lucy might have died in that abandoned house." Victoria turned to him, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "I only did what any decent person would do, James. You are the one who braved the blizzard not once but twice, who put your own life at risk to save a child and bring the truth to light. You are the remarkable one." James found himself moving closer, drawn by an attraction that had grown steadily stronger throughout this ordeal. "Victoria, I know we have known each other only a brief time, but I feel as though I have known you far longer. Working alongside you these past days, seeing your compassion, your intelligence, your strength, it has affected me in ways I did not anticipate." Color rose in Victoria's cheeks, but she did not look away. "I have felt it too, James. This connection between us. In the midst of all this darkness and pain, there has been something bright, something that gave me hope and courage. I find myself not wanting this investigation to end because it would mean you would leave, return to your life in the city, and I would remain here as Lucy's governess." James took her hand gently, marveling at how right it felt in his own. "What if you did not have to remain here? What if there were other possibilities, other paths we might explore together?" Before Victoria could respond, they were interrupted by Catherine Pemberton entering the library. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as though a terrible burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "Forgive me for intruding, but I wanted to speak with both of you. Detective Thornton, I owe you a debt I can never repay. You have returned my daughter to me and restored my sister. You have shown compassion and wisdom beyond anything I could have hoped for." "I only did my duty, Mrs. Pemberton," James replied, though he did not release Victoria's hand. Catherine's eyes went to their joined hands, and a small, knowing smile crossed her face. "I see that perhaps something else of value has come from this terrible ordeal. Miss Whitmore, you have been a treasure to our family, a devoted and caring governess to Lucy, but I suspect that your heart may be leading you in a different direction now." Victoria looked uncertain, torn between her duty and her feelings. "Mrs. Pemberton, I would never abandon Lucy, especially not after what she has endured. She will need stability and familiar faces as she recovers from this trauma." Catherine moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Victoria's arm. "Lucy will have stability, my dear. She will have her mother and father, though Robert and I will have much to discuss about his future role in this family. She will also have her Aunt Sarah, who deserves the chance to know her niece and to be part of our family once more. But you, Victoria, you deserve the chance to build your own life, to follow your own heart. I have seen the way you and the detective look at each other. Do not sacrifice your happiness out of misplaced obligation." James felt hope surge in his chest. "Victoria, I would be honored if you would consider leaving this position and coming to Chicago with me. Not as my wife immediately, he added quickly, mindful of propriety, but as someone I would like to court properly, to know better, with the hope that perhaps in time, our feelings might deepen into something permanent. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. James, I would like that very much. I would like that more than I can say. But what would I do in Chicago? I have no family there, no connections. You would have me, James said firmly. And I have connections throughout the city. There are families who would value a governess of your quality and character. Or perhaps you might consider other paths. You have shown yourself to be an excellent investigator in your own right. The details you remembered, the observations you made, they were invaluable. Chicago could use someone with your skills. Catherine laughed softly. A lady detective? How wonderfully modern. I think it is a splendid idea. Victoria, you have my blessing and my gratitude. I will provide you with the finest references, and I insist on compensating you handsomely for your years of devoted service. It is the least I can do. Over the next several days, as the snow melted and the roads became passable once more, the resolution of the case took final form. Robert Pemberton, faced with the prospect of criminal charges and the fury of his wife, agreed to a separation and to providing generous financial support for both Catherine and Sarah. Catherine made it clear that she would not tolerate his presence until he had made full amends for his actions, if such a thing were even possible. Sarah, after long discussions with James and a lawyer Catherine hired for her, agreed to accept treatment for her grief and trauma rather than face criminal charges for Lucy's abduction. The prosecutor, upon reviewing James's detailed report and understanding the full context of her actions, agreed that justice would be better served by helping Sarah heal than by imprisoning her. She would stay with Catherine and Lucy, rebuilding the sisterly bond that had been so cruelly severed. Lucy herself, resilient as children often are, began to recover quickly. She grew attached to her Aunt Sarah, sensing perhaps some shared sadness that drew her to the woman. Sarah, in turn, found that caring for her niece helped ease the ache of losing Rose. It would never replace her daughter, but it gave her purpose and connection. On the day James was to return to Chicago, the entire household gathered to bid him farewell. Lucy, bundled warmly against the cold, presented him with a drawing she had made, a picture of him standing heroically in the snow, rescuing her from the storm. It was childishly rendered, but touched his heart deeply. "Thank you for finding me, Mr. Detective," Lucy said solemnly. "Mama says you are the bravest man in all of Chicago. Will you come visit us again?" James knelt down to her level, his heart full. "I will indeed, Miss Lucy. And perhaps the next time I visit I will bring someone special with me. Would you like that?" Lucy's eyes went to Victoria, who stood nearby with her bags packed, ready to begin her new life. "Miss Whitmore? Oh yes, please bring her. She is my favorite person in the whole world. Well, except for Mama and Aunt Sarah now." Victoria embraced the child tenderly, whispering promises to write letters and visit often. Then she said her farewells to the rest of the household staff, who had become like family to her during her time there. Mrs. Davies wept openly, pressing packages of food into Victoria's hands for the journey. Henry Ashford maintained his butler's dignity, but allowed himself a rare smile as he wished her well. Catherine and Sarah stood together, arms linked, as they watched Victoria prepare to leave. Catherine spoke softly, her words meant for Victoria's ears alone. "You have given our family so much, dear Victoria. You cared for my daughter with devotion. You helped uncover the truth that set us free, and you showed us all what true courage looks like. I hope you find every happiness with your detective. You both deserve it." Sarah added her own quiet blessing. "Thank you for not judging me, Miss Whitmore. Thank you for seeing me as a person, not a monster. I hope your future is filled with the joy that was stolen from me. Make the most of every precious moment." As the carriage pulled away from the Pemberton estate, James and Victoria sat side by side, watching the grand house recede into the distance. The winter sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, casting everything in brilliant light. The world seemed new, washed clean by the storm, full of possibility. "Are you frightened?" James asked, taking Victoria's hand in his. "You are leaving behind everything familiar, venturing into an uncertain future." Victoria looked at him, her green eyes clear and confident. "I am not frightened at all, James. For the first time in my life, I feel as though I am moving toward something rather than away from it. I am moving toward hope, toward possibility, toward a future I get to help create. And I am moving toward you." James raised her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I promise you, Victoria, I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to be worthy of the trust you are placing in me. We will build something beautiful together, something honest and true. I know we will," Victoria said softly, resting her head against his shoulder. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." As they traveled toward Chicago, toward their new beginning, James reflected on the case that had changed his life. He had set out to find a lost child and had succeeded in that mission. But he had found something else as well, something he had not known he was searching for. He had found a partner, a companion, someone who matched him in courage, intelligence, and heart. The blizzard that had seemed like an obstacle had instead become the catalyst for transformation. It had forced truths into the light, broken down walls of deception, and brought together people who were meant to find each other. Lucy was safe with her mother and her newly restored aunt. Sarah had a chance to heal and to know the family that had been stolen from her. Catherine had freed herself from a husband who valued reputation over truth. And James and Victoria had found each other, two souls perfectly matched, ready to face whatever the future might bring. 6 months later, on a warm summer evening, James and Victoria stood together in a small church in Chicago, speaking vows that would bind them together for life. Among the guests were Catherine, Sarah, and Lucy, who served as flower girl and took her role with utmost seriousness. The Pemberton women had traveled to Chicago specifically for the wedding, determined to witness the happy ending to a story that had begun in darkness and fear. As James slipped a simple gold band onto Victoria's finger, promising to love and cherish her all his days, he caught her eye and saw his own joy reflected there. They had both braved their own blizzards, storms of circumstance, duty, and uncertainty, and they had emerged on the other side together, stronger for what they had endured, grateful for what they had found. The detective who had set out to solve a mystery had discovered something far more precious than any case file could contain. He had discovered love, true and deep and lasting. And the governess who had wondered if she would ever have a life beyond service and duty had found not just freedom, but partnership, passion, and purpose. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, greeting the smiling faces of friends and family, Victoria whispered to James, "Do you remember that first night at the Pemberton estate when I came to your room to tell you about the letter? I was so frightened, so uncertain, and yet even then I felt something when I looked at you, something that told me my life was about to change." James squeezed her hand gently, his heart overflowing with happiness. "I felt it too, my love. It was as though the blizzard had brought us together for a reason, as though all the darkness and danger were worth enduring because they led us to each other. Whatever investigations the future holds, whatever mysteries we encounter, we will face them together." And they did. Detective James Thornton and his wife Victoria became one of Chicago's most formidable teams, solving cases that baffled others, bringing truth to light, and fighting for justice for those who had been wronged. Their partnership, forged in the heart of a blizzard, proved unbreakable. The mystery that had seemed so impossible at the start had been solved not just through deductive reasoning, but through compassion, understanding, and the courage to see beyond surface appearances to the wounded hearts beneath. And in solving it, James had not only saved a child and restored a family, he had found his own happy ending, the one he had never dared to dream of, with the remarkable woman who had captured his heart from the very first moment their eyes met. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world transformed. And in that transformation, two people had found each other, found love, and found the beginning of a beautiful life together.